Hey, welcome back. Over the last few episodes of Ren Behind the Practice, I've had some really thoughtful conversations with practitioners who are actively building their work in real time. And something interesting has already started to happen. Certain themes keep showing up, even though the practitioners themselves have very different backgrounds, modalities, and paths. This idea actually came from Heather Schirle in episode 3. She's the one who suggested that it might be helpful if every once in a while I paused and reflected on the patterns that were emerging across the conversations that I was having. So, Heather, thank you so much for that idea. Huge shout out to you. So, Heather, thank you so much for that idea. Huge shout out to you. And I'm going to try it because the more conversations that I record, the more I realized how helpful it might be to zoom out and notice what's showing up across the board. So every 5 or so conversations, I'm going to pause and look at the themes across that section of conversations. And then I'm going to share with you some of those themes that I'm seeing. These are going to be like reflections from the field, my interpretation of the larger patterns at play, taking it one step further, not only shining light on and having these conversations out in the open, but then also starting to connect the dots about what practitioners are actually experiencing and saying when they're talking about what it's actually like building a practice. Today, I want to share 3 patterns that have already shown up across the conversations from episodes 2 through 6. Pattern number 1. Practitioners were trained to serve, not to build businesses. This was the first pattern that stuck out to me. Most practitioners have spent years, sometimes even decades, becoming incredibly skilled at the work that they do. They've studied their modality, they've trained deeply, they cared deeply about helping people, but almost none of them were ever taught how to build a business. Angela talked about this in episode 4 when she described leaving the hospital system and starting her nurse coaching practice. She realized very quickly that the skills required to care for people inside an institution are completely different from the skills required to build something independently. Heather also touched on this in episode 3 when she talked about the transition from doing meaningful work with clients to realizing she also had to figure out how to structure and grow a practice around it. And Megan in episode 5 described a similar experience, trying to follow advice from mentors or business programs that technically worked for other industries or for other people, but they didn't actually translate well to the kind of work that she is doing. This is something that comes up constantly when I talk to practitioners and healers and coaches. The business side isn't clicking. It's harder than they thought it was going to be. It's harder than they think it should be. So often there is so much guilt or shame that is internalized because people think that they should know how to do it. They think they should have figured it out by now. They think that it shouldn't be this hard. But in reality, they were never taught how to build a business in the first place. And not only not taught how to build a business, but especially not one that is very solid and is set up for long-term sustainability. So most of the time, what happens is people have their modality, they are certified, they are ready to serve, and they start offering, whether it's one-on-one sessions or group programs or a course, whatever it is that they're offering, they launch that offer. But they launch that offer to avoid. They launch it to no one. And then they try to sell, and then they try to build a business, and then they try to figure out the business part. So a few things going on here. Number 1, it's a very difficult place to figure out the business. And number 2, often they just end up trying tactic after tactic, like try this and that didn't work. So let me change my price, or let me try this thing. Well, this worked for so-and-so. So let me get on this platform, or let me take this angle, or let me change my message. It's different tactics, different marketing strategies, different social media plans or funnels, when the real issue is actually much earlier in the process. It is laying the foundations in the startup phase that happens even before you launch your first offer. So again, it's a business foundations problem. No amount of tactics will actually work. Think of a modality that you are an expert at. Think of all of the study and certification, formal and informal, you did to get to the place of expertise where you are. So let's use hypnotherapy as an example. This would be like someone who's never studied hypnotherapy before, one day saying, you know what, I think I'm going to start doing hypnotherapy sessions with people. So they get someone in a session and they just start trying to figure it out. Then they book another session and they're trying a little more, and maybe, oh, that didn't really work with the last client. Let me kind of try this angle. And maybe they think, this person does hypnotherapy. I've been in a session and this is kind of what they did with me. So let me try that. And they kind of will tweak something or try a different tactic. The key point here, none of us are wrong for taking this path. I'm using this metaphor as an exercise to show that without understanding the underlying process and strategy for building a startup business, you'll always feel like you're wearing a blindfold. You'll never really ever be able to anchor confidently into your business, just like someone who, without ever studying hypnotherapy formally, might never ever fully feel solid. Even if they start to get some things clicking, they might not ever have the full quality or the full impact with their clients, and they will likely never feel fully confident standing in that space as a hypnotherapist, missing those fundamental foundations. So the big takeaway from pattern number 1, if you want to build a solid business that is sustainable long-term, financially sustainable, energetically sustainable, emotionally and physically sustainable, you have to take the time to put your business foundations in place. Pattern number 2, visibility feels deeply uncomfortable for many practitioners. This came up over and over and over again, how uncomfortable visibility can feel. Angela talked about the tension of being a naturally private person while trying to build a practice that requires being visible online. Claudia mentioned something similar in episode 6, the emotional labor of stepping into leadership and putting her work into the world before she fully feels ready. And Megan described the resistance that comes up when marketing starts to feel performative or disconnected from her authentic voice. This is a huge one. A lot of practitioners think they hate marketing for this reason. But what I have found is that most of them don't actually hate marketing. They actually don't hate putting themselves out there. They hate performative marketing, and they hate putting themselves out there when they're not sure if what they're putting out there is being received. So they either avoid visibility entirely, or they try to force themselves into a strategy or structure that doesn't really feel aligned. What I've seen work much better is shifting the focus away from performance and toward conversation. So instead of asking, how do I market myself? What should I say? I wonder what people most want to hear. I wonder what's going to have the most impact or draw them in the most. The better question is often, who are the people I most want to help, and how do I start real conversations with them? When visibility becomes relational instead of performative, it tends to feel much more sustainable. It feels good on our nervous systems. And we can own our spaces and our own areas of expertise much quicker. And if you've worked with me, you know that I am a huge believer in building a practice in a way that you never have to sell. It's about cultivating community instead. And it is possible. And that's the type of visibility that feels really, really, really good on our nervous systems. And finally, pattern number 3. Many practitioners struggle to explain work that creates intangible results. This kept surfacing, the challenge of communicating work that produces results that you can't easily measure or photograph. Megan talked about this beautifully in episode 5. She had a client that left a session saying something like, I don't know what you did, I just feel different, which is actually a powerful outcome. But it's hard to translate that into marketing language. Angela was touching on something similar when she was talking about her nurse coaching work. The value she offers isn't a quick procedure or a 15-minute diagnosis. It's time, it's listening, it's being fully seen and supported. Those things can be transformational for clients, but they don't fit neatly into before and after marketing. And Allison spoke about a similar challenge in episode 2 when she described the kind of deep shifts that happen in her work with her clients that are going through the messy middle. As she supports them through the messy middle, these things can look like changes in awareness, perspective, emotional experiences that are very real for the person going through them, but they're difficult to capture in a simple explanation. or again in a before and after photo. This is something I see constantly with holistic practitioners and coaches and healers who are doing deep, meaningful, multidimensional work. The results are real and they're often profound and life-changing results, but they don't always translate easily into marketing language. So practitioners often feel stuck trying to explain something that is deeply real, but it's difficult to quantify. This is where messaging becomes incredibly important. Because even when the work itself is subtle or intangible or multidimensional, the outcomes that people are looking for are usually very, very clear. So to explain that a little more clearly, people do have clear and urgent pain points, and they have clear and deeply desired dream outcomes for those pain points. So when practitioners learn the process for finding out those clear and specific urgent pain points and dream outcomes, and then they understand how to connect their work directly to those dream outcomes in language that their people immediately recognize, everything changes. This is the magic and the secret sauce to building really solid and financially sustainable holistic practices. So before we sign off for today, one of the reasons I wanted to create this podcast is because there are so many practitioners that assume they're the only ones struggling with these things. Or maybe they assume others are as well, but it's still this elephant in the room that isn't always acknowledged. But when you start listening to enough conversations behind the scenes, you realize these patterns are incredibly common. The isolation, the visibility discomfort, the confusion about how to translate powerful work into clear messaging or into a sustainable business model. If you resonated with any of those patterns, none of them means that you are wrong. It just means you're building something meaningful in an environment where the guidance hasn't caught up yet. And that's exactly why these conversations matter. So yes, again, if any of these patterns resonated with you, you might enjoy going back and listening to the conversation with Allison in episode 2, Heather in episode 3, Angela in episode 4, Megan in episode 5, or Claudia in episode 6. All of those episodes are linked in the show notes, so you can go directly back to each one of those. Each of them shares their journey of building something real in their own way. And as these conversations continue, I know that more patterns are going to continue to emerge, and we will continue to keep looking behind the practice and continue to keep naming them here together. See you next time.